World War I had fighter pilots. Howard Hughes made a movie of it called The Hells Angels. The Flying Tigers, who were mercenaries in China, and one of their squadrons was called the Hells Angels. In 1948, the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club was started in Fontana, California. And the stories I've always heard was that pilots based in the San Bernardino area rode motorcycles, and when people would see them going by, they'd say, "There go one of those Hells Angels."
The club started after World War II. Now, there's discrepancies between people when the actual time was. And I know the date they picked was March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 1948. But there's some controversy that it was actually a couple of years later. There was a guy, Dick White, I believe, who came to us in the late 70s and said, you know, this is when the club actually started. So I'm not sure whose version is correct. It started out of San Bernardino, and I was told it was a club called the Pooh Bobs, the pissed off bastards from Bloomingdale. And they had a split in the club, a power type split, and they, branched off. Club fragmented, they branched off and became the Hells Angels, what are the modern day Hells Angels. Now, one of the interesting things about that is if you ever watch The Wild One, that's what the premise is of The Wild One. The two clubs converge on that imaginary town with Marlon Brando leading one group of individuals, and then Lee Marvin, who is more of the outlaw fringe. I always saw Lee Marvin as more of the outlaw guy, and Brando was a little bit cleaner. And I thought, gee, I wonder if somehow Hollywood grabbed that. Now I know at one time Sal Mineo was down in San Bernardino, and he was interested in making a movie about the club. And we used to have this game called Hits and Tokes. And you'd be standing around smoking marijuana, and you'd ask somebody if they wanted a hit. And they would have to say, no, I'd like a toke. And if they said, yeah, I'll take a hit, then you'd smack them. And Sal kept getting smacked. And he got frustrated, and then he finally figured out the game. So hits and tokes. Sonny Barger and I spoke about it personally, and Sonny Barger told me 1948, and he said they picked March 17th out of thin air. That's where his exact words. Now, Sonny Barger didn't come around till 10 years later almost. 1957, they started the Oakland Hells Angels, and, he was on the ground floor of that. So I don't think anybody really knows an exact date. I have talked to this gentleman, Bo Bushnell, that runs Outlaw Archives, a friend of mine, and he's got some tapes of Dick talking about the origins of the club, and he disagrees with the 1948 date. So it's a bit of a controversy, but I guess really, in the end, it doesn't matter because the Hells Angels became the prominent force in the outlaw bike world. The Outlaw Motorcycle Club, the Outlaws from the back east, they claim they were around longer than the Hells Angels. The Hells Angels always said, well, we were the first original, but, they weren't. I mean, there were the Booze Fighters, the Galloping Goose, the Pooh Bobs, 13 Rebels. So, who knows? I always say the movement started in Southern California, but because I'm a Southern California boy, so that's what I say. But, do I know for a fact? No. It's just like the term one percenter. One percenter term, I was always under the assumption it came out of Hollister in 1948. The American Motorcycle said only 1% ruined it for the wholesome riders. But later I heard that that term didn't come out till the late 50s, early 60s. the first 1%er meetings started in the early 60s, late 50s, and they were the Hells Angels, the Straight Satans, the Losers, eventually the Question Marks, the Galloping Goose. Was a small, close-knit community of bikers. And, you know, when I start talking about that stuff, these were 1%er runs that you go up to Kern River, like I think I mentioned it last time we talked, that Old Man John, that's where I met him. You know, I went up there with the Slaves, the Losers were there, the Question Marks were there, Straight Satans may have been there. You know what? I think they might have been put out of business by then. What had happened with the Straight Satans is Danny DeMarco, last name escapes me. He fingered Charlie Manson and the Manson family for all the murders. And I have a picture in my archives somewhere. Now you'll notice this is an interesting photo. You can recognize this gentleman here. That's Charlie Manson. And you'll notice, forget this guy's name. You'll notice Charlie's being led around. This is a member of the Straight Satans. Danny DiCarlo, I think was his name, or DeMarco. DiCarlo, I think. And you'll notice, do you notice anything different about him? He's handcuffed in the front. Which, if you look at it, that really tells a story. Danny was cooperating, and after, you know, a lot of people aren't aware that the Satan Slaves, the Question Marks, maybe not so much the Question Marks, but the Slaves and the Straight Satans used to go up to the ranch where Charlie was living up there with all the girls, and people would go up there and party because all the girls were up there, and it was one wild party. And, you know, somehow I think, you know, Charlie was going to try to utilize the outlaw motorcycle culture as some sort of army for him in his delusional mind, if you will. Sonny and I had a up and down relationship, you know, till I left the club. But I've got to give him the credit. You know, I think he became the voice and the face of the Hells Angels. He was very controlling, and the club was, I don't want to use the term different factions, but they weren't united. They weren't joined together. And what happened was Sonny started getting rid of these little satellite clubs that were calling themselves Hells Angels. And ultimately, it was San Bernardino, San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, and things started going from there. Sacramento, then part of Sacramento became the Nomads. They were having so much trouble in Sacramento. So I have to attribute that organization to Sonny. Now, was it by design or just by chance? You know, the name Hells Angels seemed to capture the media, sold a lot of newspapers, headlined a lot of movies, those B movies, you know, Roger Corman movies and whatnot. And I think that I'm going to talk about how the transition of the patch came about. Sonny ran into a guy in Southern California. He was a Hells Angel as well, but he had a different center patch. He had a larger type center patch. The Hells Angels in San Bernardino, San Francisco, and then Oakland had a very small, what we call the bumblebee death head. And it slowly made a transition. But Sonny saw the larger death head version on this kind of outlaw Hells Angel club in San Fernando Valley, I believe. And he told me, he said, I liked the death head so much, I had a business card, not a business card, but a courtesy card. Took the courtesy card and got, it was a member named Gut, who, interesting guy, also was the manager for Blue Cheer, the member of the group from the 60s. They were like the LSD rock group, Blue Cheer. And He promoted a lot of concerts in the Bay Area. He was a Oakland, maybe a San Francisco Hell's Angel at one time, but he helped design the larger Death Head. And the North and the South fought over that for years. I think that San Bernardino didn't want to change to the larger Death Head. There seemed to be some resistance from San Francisco. And then there were some fistfights like at Bass Lake over what was going to be the universal patch for the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club now that they had started to eliminate a lot of these little satellite Hells Angel clubs. And came to a head at Bass Lake, maybe in the 65. I don't know what the exact year was. But it was interesting. The Hells Angels Oakland sent San Bernardino a box full of new patches. They said, this is now the patch. And I think it was Grubby Glenn shot holes in it and sent them back to Sonny. Said, well, this is what we think of your new patch. And then it came to a head at Bass Lake. Bass Lake was a place where a lot of issues were settled. You had a problem with somebody, you run into them at Bass Lake, and you have your showdown, if you will, and confrontation, and then you either resolve it or somebody winds up leaving and disgrace the camp that particular weekend. I think what Sonny was looking for was some sort of structure, some sort of order, some rules as guidelines, because there were no rules whatsoever. That's, people were shooting heroin, getting loaded on anything they could get their hands on. And that stuff was all stopped, and started getting some rules and regulations. And it appeared to me that Sonny had a game plan, but I don't know if he was shooting from the hip or if it was thought out. It was a conversation I never had with him.